Some of these movies were actually banned in several countries for decades, but they were all blacklisted in one way or another. The CIA, Big Tobacco, even Molotov cocktail-wielding Catholics pulled out all the stops to make sure you and I never saw these movies. This list features movies deemed the most dangerous, most violent, most blasphemous movies ever released, plus what was probably going to be the most stunning animated movie of all time, completely bastardized to compete with Disney's Aladdin. Fortunately, though, you can easily access all of these movies today, some of them for free. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring this video, but we're going to start with a wild one. Now, apparently, no animals were actually harmed during the making of my first pick here, but 70 cast and crew members were. Roar has been affectionately deemed the most dangerous film ever made. Roar features 150 untrained lions, tigers, and other big cats, leading to those 70 injuries, a bunch of which are still in the movie. So many people got hurt, largely due to negligence. They did not have enough trainers for this many big cats. Like, there aren't enough trainers really in the world to handle this many big cats at once. But Tippi Hedren, who is probably most famous for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, she didn't marry the Tiger King, but she married the Lion King, Noel Marshall, who was a big cat enthusiast. He stars in the movie, sort of playing a version of himself. Tippi Hedren plays his wife. Her and her children are at a certain point chased down by mostly lions through a house, and it's wild stuff. Now, I will admit, this is not a great movie. It's pretty sloppy. That's probably one of the reasons it got buried, but also just the immense legal trouble releasing a movie like this that features people actually getting hurt pretty severely in some cases. It was just going to be too much for the studio, and the juice was not worth the squeeze because the movie's not very good. But as a wild movie enthusiast, they did release it on Blu-ray. I recently purchased this on Amazon. It like $12. It was pretty cheap and well worth the time. The storytelling is weak. There's not much of a story at all. It tries to do like a version of The Birds. And I'll say, the movie's not nearly as intense as you might expect. You're not seeing people get ripped apart, but you are seeing a lot of people getting lightly mauled. And even though there's comparisons to movies like The Birds, there's honestly nothing else out there like Roar.
It's just like life. You get the funny with the tragic.
Next up, we've got probably the most obvious one on this list, Cannibal Holocaust. Now, this one is famous for being an incredibly intense movie. It's one of the goriest movies ever made, but that's not exactly what got it banned. This movie's from Italy, and shortly after its release there, Italian police seized all the copies of the movie, fearing that it was an actual snuff film. Now, I'm not going to show you much of Cannibal Holocaust here, but it's a dark, disturbing movie with a lot of practical effects that were so realistic for the time. The director actually had to haul in the cast into court to prove that they were all alive and well. Now, part of that was his own doing. He actually made all of them sign contracts that they would not appear in public for a year to kind of heighten the dread. So he did do this to himself, but while he was not convicted of crimes against humanity, he was convicted of animal cruelty because there are some animals that were harmed in the making of this one. Cannibal Holocaust would go on to become banned in a bunch of countries, including the UK, Australia, Norway, and New Zealand, where it is technically still a banned movie, which is bizarre because my number one pick on this list, which was deemed the goriest movie ever made, it's from New Zealand. Now, my next pick was so controversial that people actually threw Molotov cocktails into a theater screening this movie, injuring a bunch of people. Before we get to that, I do want to tell you about today's sponsor, Delete Me, and how they've been helping me protect my personal data lately. Unfortunately, nearly everyone's personal data, including your name and address, is being sold online by data brokers. What's even worse is anybody can purchase your personal data, and leaving your personal details on this open marketplace opens you up to the threats of identity theft, harassment, stalking, and makes you a prime target for phishing scams. But you do have the right to protect that personal information. To do so, you'd have to contact all of those data brokers individually and repeatedly until you confirmed they erased all your information. That's what Delete Me does for you. Every quarter, they send you a new report showing you how many of these websites they removed your information from, how many they're still working on, as well as how much time they saved you. And it was super simple to set this up. It took less than 5 minutes. Now, I just get that quarterly report, I get less junk in my inbox, and my phone doesn't ring all day from telemarketers. And right now, my viewers can save 20% off of Delete Me consumer plans when you go to my link down in the video description, or just go to joindeleteme.com/flick. Delete Me can even protect your entire family with a family plan, so check out that link in the video description to get 20% off. It's a service I highly recommend, but speaking of things I highly recommend, let's get to the movie list. Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ sparked religious protest around the world, leading to outright bans in multiple countries. The situation got so out of hand that a group of Catholic fundamentalists threw Molotov cocktails into a theater showing the movie in Paris, injuring 13 people. And having seen this movie multiple times, most of that hysteria was completely unfounded, in the sense that it was outrage from people who did not see the movie or fully understand what Scorsese was trying to do with it. Because most of The Last Temptation of Christ is just a Jesus movie, not that different from Jesus of Nazareth. Willem Dafoe portrays Jesus, which is a bit odd, but he's an amazing actor. He does a great job. Most of the story here, though, are actual stories from the Bible told with pretty accurate detail. However, as he's dying on the cross, the movie takes some, let's say, creative liberties. That's really ultimately what the movie's about, is this different perspective on Christ's last temptation. And it's very thought-provoking without really feeling blasphemous at all to me. I mean, if anything, it almost heightens how difficult dying on the cross was. I think it's actually a really smart, beautiful movie with some flaws, but certainly I don't think it deserved nearly as much outrage as it sparked. Things seldom do, especially art. Now, another somewhat recent one was actually a big budget, award-winning movie that the CIA and a handful of senators tried to suppress, Zero Dark 30.
I'm not your friend. I'm not gonna help you. I'm gonna break you. Any questions?
Now, you may remember this movie is the hunt for Osama bin Laden. The climax is when they actually find him and kill him. But the movie heavily features enhanced interrogation techniques, which is code for torture. Or at least at the time that this came out, there was a lot of debate as to whether or not we should keep on doing that. Odds are we're still doing it and just not talking about it, but it's so intense in the movie that the CIA did not want this actually released, or at least didn't want people watching it. And while it was in no way banned, I mean, it had a major theatrical release, they did tampen down some of the marketing for this movie and pulled away from the push for a bunch of awards during Oscar season. Not that it would have won any otherwise, but still it's odd to me that the government tried to suppress a movie about us killing Osama bin Laden. And if anything, the pushback kind of proves that that interrogation technique is wrong. Otherwise, why would you be trying to suppress it? Now, I did not know this until I was prepping for this video, but A Clockwork Orange, made by Stanley Kubrick in the UK, was actually banned in the UK, fully banned for decades. I had no idea. Apparently, after its release, the media began reporting on copycat crimes that seem to be very similar to the ones in the movie. Now, while some of that may be true, at the same time, the book and the movie are depicting the types of crimes people were already doing. However, the media pressure and pressure from death threats against Kubrick and his family led to Kubrick himself requesting that the movie be banned in the UK about a year after its initial release. It would go on to be fully banned in the UK for 30 years, and the only way to see it there was bootleg VHS tapes, often concealed in brown paper bags. So, watching A Clockwork Orange in the UK was literally a crime for a long time.
But enough of words. Actions speak louder than action now.
Now, while I don't have a Quentin Tarantino movie on this list, my next selection is one that he wrote, and similar to A Clockwork Orange, apparently Natural Born Killers inspired some copycat murders as well. Natural Born Killers was ultimately banned in Ireland because of supposed copycat murders that were committed in the UK and France. Director Oliver Stone was even sued by a family of one of the victims. The case had dragged out for years. But again, in this case, while the movie may have inspired people, it's also based on crimes of people like Bonnie and Clyde, real-life crimes that, also inspire people.
Mallory, you take Mickey to be your... I ain't gonna murder anybody on a wedding day.
Now, supposedly, the Disney-owned studio Touchstone minimized marketing efforts in order to not anger the tobacco companies, which it only reinforces their intimidation tactics in The Insider. Now, I love this film. It's just an amazing drama. I have talked about it here recently, but it not only features stunning performances and cinematography, but it's a pretty harrowing story about a whistleblower played by Russell Crowe who alerts people to some of the shady tactics of the tobacco companies. Now, when this whistleblower came to light, people already knew cigarettes were bad for you, but they did not know how much the tobacco companies were actually scheming behind the scenes to prevent this information from getting out, how much they were downplaying it, as well as how much the tobacco companies knew cigarettes were harming the public. He blew the whistle on that stuff, was intimidated heavily, even though apparently some of the intimidation tactics depicted in The Insider were made up for dramatic effect. I've always suspected that this movie is actually very accurate, even though they say some of the stuff was added. To me, again, that sounds like trying to not anger the tobacco companies. Now, next up, we've got that stunning animated movie, and it's one of the titles on this list you can watch for free. Before that, I did come across an interesting movie I'd never heard of before. It's Marlon Brando's last film, Johnny Depp's directorial debut, and it was never released. It's titled The Brave, a movie about a man who agrees to be murdered on film for money. After its screening at the Cannes Film Festival, the reaction was so poor and the movie was so bleak, Johnny Depp has even said himself the movie is just too sad to sell. But famous animator Richard Williams, who's probably most famous for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he spent 30 years developing an animated movie that is going to take your breath away, yet the studio completely destroyed this movie. After decades of painstaking work, The Thief and the Cobbler was rushed into theaters in order to compete with Disney's Aladdin. It actually has a lot in common with Aladdin, which is why the studio thought they might be able to compete with Disney, but in order to do so, they rushed through some of the animation work, cut a lot of the movie out, stuffed it with celebrity voices and music that Williams himself did not approve, even though he was the director. It was panned critically, quickly forgotten, and essentially rotted and died on the vine. It is such a shame, but the glimmer of hope with The Thief and the Cobbler is there's actually people that have been working to restore this movie. You can currently watch it for free on YouTube in its uncompleted form. And if you're interested in animation, animated filmmaking in general, hell, even just art, if you like drawing, you gotta see this unfinished version of The Thief and the Cobbler. Not only is the animation style just absolutely breathtaking, I mean, the fluidity and the way they move and the way the backgrounds are designed, everything is incredible with this movie. It really is a one-of-a-kind watch, but this unfinished version will suddenly jump to animated sketches, underpaintings, revealing the layers it takes to create an animated movie. And it actually makes for a one-of-a-kind viewing experience. It's not as great as seeing the whole realized vision, but seeing uncompleted parts of it, as a movie nerd myself, I find just to be a real treat, making this movie really kind of stand out on this list as a special watch and also a very enjoyable one. Hailed as one of the greatest gangster epics of all time, my next pick was panned by critics when it released because the studio, in all its wisdom, took a 4-hour epic from one of the greatest filmmakers of all time and cut it down into an incoherent 2-hour gangster flick Once Upon a Time in America. Now, since then, this movie has been re-released in its full form. You can see it in full HD. It's all finished. It's an amazing American gangster movie. It stars Robert De Niro, James Woods, and is from director Sergio Leone, who's most famous for his westerns like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And while the westerns are my favorite, this is still a stunning gangster movie loaded with all sorts of just amazing Americana, iconic imagery. And while I do understand why the studio would take 4 hours and turn it to 2, I mean, you've got ticket sales and things to consider. It's great that they didn't spend forever to ultimately re-release this movie. I actually had no idea this was cut down like that when it released. I've only ever seen the full version. But as I said, the goriest movie ever made hails from New Zealand, the country where Cannibal Holocaust is still banned. And that may be because the gore in Dead Alive is pretty far from realistic. However, that did not stop the United States from enforcing the most aggressive censorship on this movie, with nearly 15 minutes of gore removed, a big chunk of the movie, and the entire thing was desaturated. Now, this movie is my number one pick, not because it's the greatest feat of filmmaking on this list, but this is one of my favorite movies in this genre. It is absolutely hilarious from beginning to end, loaded with eye-popping practical effects. Yes, loads and loads of disgusting gore, but almost every single gory effect built for this movie was done for laughs. And just like The Thief and the Cobbler, it's available for free on YouTube right now. I'll put a link down in the video description to the latest uploaded version. It may not be available forever, but this is a notoriously difficult movie to come across. DVDs are sparse. I've got one, but it's never on streaming services. So if you want to see it, check out the YouTube link down in the video description. Here's a quick recap of the list, along with streaming services currently hosting these titles. Just keep in mind, availability is always subject to relatively quick change. So if you want these recommendations as soon as I release them, make sure you've clicked the subscribe button. If you leave the video a like, I'll appreciate it. And YouTube may be more likely to recommend my content to you again in the future, but I'm going to keep making these as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for watching this special cinematic contraband episode, and you will see me on the next one.